Dawn came quietly to the guild hall. The stone building held the night a little longer than the streets outside. Thick walls kept the early chill inside, along with the steady scent of old smoke and iron. A single hearth burned low at the far end of the room, embers resting beneath pale ash. The air smelled faintly of damp wool and cooled steel. The hall was already awake, though no one hurried. A clerk moved slowly between tables, setting out ledgers one at a time. The scratch of parchment against wood was soft and even. Somewhere near the back, a door opened and closed again, wood touching stone without force. Boots rested near the hearth, set carefully to dry. A thin curl of warmth moved through the room, carrying the faint scent of ash and yesterday's stew. Brenna Stonehand sat on one of the long benches closest to the fire. She leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees, hands wrapped loosely around a cup of thin ale. Her armor lay beside her in a neat arrangement, worn leather, dull steel, each piece placed with familiar care. Her blade rested against the bench within easy reach. The firelight traced the edge without catching. She took a slow drink and considered it. "This is weaker than yesterday," she said. Her voice was low and steady. Across the table, Edrin Vale adjusted the strap of his satchel. He checked each clasp in turn, not because he doubted them, but because he always did. His hands moved with patient precision. "It's early," he said. "They save the stronger casks for evening." Brenna nodded once and drank again. Kayla Thorne stood near a narrow eastern window. Pale light filtered through old glass, catching dust suspended in the air. She rested one shoulder against the stone and watched the street beyond. Her bow leaned against the wall beside her, unstrung. "2 wagons passed before dawn," she said. "Headed east. Light loads." No one asked how she knew. At the far end of the table, Thomas Greywick held a folded notice. The parchment had softened at its edges from repeated handling. He read it slowly, eyes moving from line to line without haste. "Routine work," he said, by the wording. Edrin glanced up briefly. "It rarely is." Thomas gave a small nod. He folded the parchment again and set it on the table. The guild hall settled further into its morning rhythm. More adventurers entered in ones and twos. Armor whispered softly as they crossed the room. A chair scraped once against stone and was steadied. Someone near the door spoke in a low voice that carried only a few words before fading. The hearth shifted with a quiet, settling sound. Brenna finished her drink and set the cup aside. She lifted her armor piece by piece, fastening it without looking down. Leather creaked softly as straps tightened. Metal settled against cloth with familiar weight. She rolled one shoulder, then the other. "Watchtower's been empty for years," she said. "If something's there now, we'll see what it is." Thomas inclined his head. Kayla turned from the window and crossed the room. She picked up her bow and ran her fingers along the curve of the wood. After a moment, she set one end against her boot and looped the string into place. She drew it back gently, testing the tension. The string hummed once, low and brief, before she eased it again. "Nothing fresh on the road yet," she said. "That gives us time," Brynna replied. Edrin opened his satchel and began his own quiet ritual. He removed small wrapped bundles and checked each one. Dried herbs tied in cloth, thin glass vials sealed with wax, a narrow roll of clean linen. He unwrapped one bundle, inspected the leaves within, then wrapped it again with care. Satisfied, he returned each item to its place. Thomas reached into his coat and withdrew a small bundle of chalk and folded cloth. He counted the sticks without looking directly at them, then tucked them back into the inner pocket. He closed his eyes briefly and drew in a slow breath. The air near the hearth felt warmer than the rest of the room. It carried the scent of ash and faintly sweet smoke. Somewhere outside, a baker's door opened. The smell of fresh bread drifted in when the main doors shifted. The clerk approached their table with measured steps, ledger tucked beneath one arm. "You're taking the notice," he said. "We are," Edrin replied. The clerk made a mark in his book. The scratch of ink was steady. "No one's come back complaining," he added after a moment. "That's usually a good sign," Brynna said. The clerk offered a thin smile and moved away. They gathered the last of their things without further discussion. Brynna lifted her blade and secured it across her back. She tested the balance once, then let it rest. Kayla slid 3 arrows part way from her quiver, checked their fletching, and eased them back into place. Edrin tightened the strap across his shoulder and rested a hand briefly against the satchel, feeling its weight. Thomas folded the notice one final time and placed it inside his coat. The hearth crackled once more behind them. They stepped out into the morning. The streets were darkened by dew. Stone held the night's coolness beneath their boots. The air outside felt clearer, touched with the scent of wet stone and fresh bread. Shutters remained closed along most of the square. A stable boy crossed the far end of the road with a quiet yawn, leading a patient mare. They moved together without speaking. At the edge of town, the road narrowed and curved east. Grass leaned close to the stones, heavy with moisture. A weathered marker stood nearby, its carvings softened by time and lichen. Kayla slowed and crouched briefly. "Tracks start here," she said. "Older." Brynna nodded. "That's fine." The town lay behind them now. Ahead, the road stretched pale beneath the widening sky. Edrin adjusted his stride to match Brynna's. "If it's nothing," he said, "we'll return by evening. And if it's something," Thomas added gently, "we'll still return. Just later." Brynna's mouth curved slightly. The sky above was pale and open. Clouds moved at an unhurried pace. The wind carried the faint rustle of distant fields. Behind them, The Guildhall doors closed once more. Inside, the hearth continued its steady burn. Boots remained near the fire, drying beside the embers. The clerk turned another page in his ledger. By evening, another notice would likely take its place. For now, the road was quiet, and they walked it as they always did. The road carried them east at an easy pace. Morning light widened slowly across the fields. The dew began to lift from the grass, leaving a faint shimmer behind. Their boots made a steady sound against stone and packed earth. No one hurried. They had walked this stretch many times before. The old trade road curved gently between low fields and scattered trees. A dry stone wall ran alongside it for a while, then fell away. Brenna adjusted the strap across her shoulder. The motion was small and deliberate. She checked the balance of her blade again, more from habit than concern. "It's settled," she said. Edrin nodded. He reached into his satchel without breaking stride and withdrew a small twist of dried apple. He handed one piece to Brenna, one to Kayla, and kept one for himself. Thomas accepted his without comment. They ate in silence for a few moments. The sweetness was mild. A farmer stood near a fence ahead, leaning on a wooden post. He raised a hand as they passed. "Guild work?" he asked. "Yes," Edrin replied. The farmer nodded once. "Road's been quiet," he said. "Too quiet, some say." Kayla glanced toward the fields beyond him. "Nothing moved at dawn," she said. The farmer seemed satisfied with that. He returned to his fence. They continued on. The road narrowed slightly as it dipped between two low rises. Gravel shifted underfoot, then settled again. Brenna slowed just enough to retie the leather binding at her wrist. The knot had loosened. She pulled it snug and tested it once. "Better," she said. Kayla walked a few paces ahead now, eyes moving across the ground and the edges of the road. She did not crouch. She did not call attention to anything. She simply watched. After a time, she spoke. "Hoofprints here," she said, "older than a day." Thomas drew a small line in the air with one finger. A faint warmth moved outward, subtle as breath against skin. "Nothing unsettled," he said after a moment. The warmth faded. They walked on. A narrow stream crossed beneath the road ahead. The wooden bridge was old but steady. Water moved below in a slow, clear line over stone. Brenna stepped onto the bridge first. The wood gave a soft creak beneath her weight. Edrin paused halfway across and leaned briefly on the railing. He looked down at the water and listened. "It's lower than last week," he said. "Dry weather," Thomas replied. Kayla knelt near the far side of the bridge and touched the damp earth beside the stream. She rubbed it between her fingers and let it fall. "No fresh crossing," she said. They left the road for a few moments and walked along the water's edge. This was not necessary. It was simply part of their routine. Brenna loosened her shoulders and rolled her neck once more. The steady movement of walking had warmed her armor slightly. The leather felt more flexible now. Edrin checked the ties on his satchel again. Thomas removed the folded notice from his coat and read it once more as he walked. His pace did not change. "Abandoned watchtower," he said quietly, "half a day ahead." "That's fine," Brinna replied. Kayla stepped back onto the road first. The others followed. The sky had shifted to a softer blue now. A thin cloud passed overhead, dimming the light for a moment before moving on. They stopped briefly beneath a lone oak. There was no signal, no discussion. It was simply where they often paused. Brinna removed her gloves and flexed her fingers. Edrin unrolled a strip of linen and refolded it neatly, ensuring the edges were straight. Kayla checked the string of her bow once more. She drew it back just enough to feel resistance, then eased it again. Thomas rested one hand against the trunk of the oak. For a moment, the air around his palm felt faintly warmer. "It's undisturbed," he said. Brinna nodded. They resumed walking. A pair of crows lifted from a distant field, wings beating slowly. The sound was steady and unhurried. The road bent eastward again. In the distance, the outline of a low rise became visible. Beyond it, barely noticeable against the sky, stood the broken top of stone. The watchtower. From here, it looked smaller than memory suggested. Kayla stopped and shaded her eyes briefly. "No movement," she said. "That's fine," Brinna answered. They did not change their pace. The wind shifted once, carrying the scent of dry grass and warm earth. Edrin adjusted his stride to match Brinna's again. "We'll reach it before midday," he said. "Yes," Thomas agreed. The road remained quiet beneath their feet, and they continued as they always did, without rush. The rise in the road came slowly. They walked toward it without changing pace. The stone beneath their boots shifted gradually to packed earth, then to a thinner scatter of gravel. Grass pressed closer to the edges. The town was no longer visible behind them. Only the road remained. Morning settled into full light. The air had warmed slightly, though the breeze still carried a trace of coolness from the night. A faint hum of insects moved through the tall grass. Brinna walked at the front now. Her stride was even and unforced. The weight of her armor had found its place against her shoulders. The leather no longer creaked. Kayla moved a few steps off the road, eyes scanning the tree line to the south. Her boots brushed against dry stems, bending them without breaking. "Rabbits pass through," she said. "Recently." Edrin glanced toward the brush. "That's a good sign," he said. Thomas walked with his hands folded loosely behind his back. His coat shifted gently with each step. The road curved again beyond the rise. From its crest, the land opened wider. Low fields stretched outward in pale greens and faded golds. A thin line of trees marked the edge of a shallow forest farther east. The broken shape of the watchtower stood beyond that line. Still distant, they descended the slope at the same steady pace. A wagon approached from the opposite direction. It moved slowly, pulled by a broad-backed mule with a patient gait. The driver sat forward on the bench, hat low over his brow. He nodded as they passed. "Tower roads ahead," he said. "We know it," Brinna replied. The wagon rolled on behind them, wheels turning with a low, repetitive rhythm. For a while, no one spoke. The wind shifted again, carrying the scent of tilled soil from a distant field. Somewhere beyond the rise, a dog barked once and then fell quiet. Kayla slowed and crouched near the road's edge. Her fingers hovered above the earth before touching it lightly. "Wagon tracks," she said. "Turned off early." Edrin stepped closer, but did not crouch. "Leaving the main road," he said. "Yes." Thomas studied the shallow impression from where he stood. "Not forced," he said. "Choice." Brinna nodded once. "They'll have had reason." They continued forward. The land grew quieter as they approached the tree line. The open fields gave way to scattered shrubs and taller grass. The road narrowed again, pressed between leaning trunks and low branches. Shade cooled the air. The sound of insects faded beneath the rustle of leaves. Brinna adjusted the strap across her chest once more. Kayla walked slightly ahead, gaze lifted now to the lower branches. Her bow remained unraised. "Feathers caught here," she said after a moment. She reached up and removed a small gray tuft from a thorn bush. "Goose," she added. Edrin took the feather from her and turned it between his fingers. "No blood," he said. He handed it back. Kayla let it fall. They walked deeper beneath the trees. The light filtered down in narrow lines. Dust drifted in the beams, slow and steady. The earth beneath their boots felt softer now. Thomas slowed slightly. He extended one hand at waist height, palm downward. A faint pressure moved outward from him, subtle as warmth from sunlit stone. "It's quiet," he said. "Too quiet?" Edrin asked gently. Thomas considered that. "No," he said after a moment. "Just quiet." They accepted that. The road bent left and then straightened. Ahead, the base of the watchtower came into clearer view between the trunks. Its stones were weathered and uneven. Moss climbed its lower half in dark green patches. A portion of the upper wall had fallen long ago. The break was old, edges softened by years of rain and wind. No smoke rose from within. No movement showed at the windows. Kayla stopped once more and listened. The forest offered only the steady rustle of leaves. "No voices," she said. Brinna rested her hand briefly on the hilt of her blade. "Good," she said. They stepped out from beneath the last line of trees and onto the clearing before the tower. Grass grew tall around its base. The wooden door hung slightly askew on its hinges, one corner resting against stone. The road curved past the clearing and continued east. Brinna paused at the edge of the open space. She looked once at the tower, then at the ground before it. "Tracks?" she asked. Kayla moved forward without haste. She crouched near the flattened grass and studied it in silence. "Several," she said after a moment. "Not recent." "How old?" Edrin asked. 2 days, maybe 3. Thomas stepped beside her and looked toward the dark opening of the doorway. "Whatever it was," he said, "it settled." Brinna exhaled slowly. "That's fine," she said. The wind moved once more through the clearing, bending the grass in a gentle sweep. The tower waited, and they approached it without hurry. They stopped short of the tower, not from hesitation, from habit. The clearing offered open ground and steady light. The sun had climbed high enough to warm the grass without pressing heat into the air. The breeze moved slowly through the clearing, bending the taller stems in quiet waves. Brinna stepped toward a flat patch of earth near a fallen stone. "We'll eat first," she said. No one disagreed. They moved without discussion, each settling into familiar motion. Kayla circled the edge of the clearing once, not searching for danger, only marking the space. Her steps were light. The grass parted and settled behind her. "Nothing new," she said when she returned. Edrin set his satchel down beside the fallen stone. He removed a small cloth bundle and untied it carefully. Inside were coarse bread and a wedge of pale cheese. Thomas seated himself on the stone and folded his hands loosely in his lap. The tower stood behind them, silent and unchanged. Brinna removed her gloves again and flexed her fingers. She accepted a piece of bread from Edrin and ate slowly. The crust broke with a soft sound. For a time, only the quiet rhythm of eating filled the clearing. A bird crossed overhead. Its shadow passed briefly over the grass and was gone. Kayla sat with her back against a low rock, bow resting across her knees. She did not look at the tower. Her gaze remained on the edges of the clearing. "Grass is flattened near the doorway," she said after a moment. "Old?" Brinna asked. "Yes." Edrin poured a small measure of water into a wooden cup and handed it across. "Livestock would press it deeper," he said. Kayla nodded. "This is lighter." Thomas watched the doorway without staring at it directly. "The stone holds warmth," he said. "Something has rested there." "Recently?" Edrin asked. "Not today." That was enough. The breeze shifted once more. It carried the faint scent of dry hay from somewhere beyond the trees. The air felt stiller near the base of the tower, as though the stone gathered quiet around it. Brinna finished her portion and brushed crumbs from her palm. "We'll look inside," she said. She did not stand immediately. Instead, she leaned back slightly and closed her eyes for a brief moment. The sun rested against her faceplate, warming the metal. Edrin rewrapped the remaining bread and returned it to his satchel. He wiped the rim of the cup with a folded cloth and secured it again. Thomas removed a small piece of chalk and turned it between his fingers. Kayla rose first. She moved toward the tower without haste, boots pressing gently into the flattened grass. She crouched near the doorway and examined the ground once more. "Tracks overlap," she said. "No dragging." "Good," Brinna replied. They approached together. The wooden door hung open at an angle, one hinge bent but holding. The wood was gray with age, its grain raised by weather. Brinna placed one hand against it and nudged it aside. The door shifted with a low, tired sound. The interior of the tower remained dim but not dark. Light filtered down from the broken upper wall, cutting soft angles across the stone floor. Dust drifted in the beams. The air inside was cool. Kayla stepped just inside the threshold and paused. "Clear," she said. They entered one at a time. The stone floor bore scattered straw and small bits of debris. A rusted bucket lay near the wall. A broken crate had collapsed in one corner. No fresh bedding. No recent fire. Edrin crouched near the straw and pressed his fingers lightly against it. "Dry," he said. Thomas extended his hand again at waist height. The faint warmth moved outward, touching the stone and settling. "There was movement," he said quietly. "Brief." "How many?" Brinna asked. "2, perhaps 3. Kayla walked slowly around the interior wall. Her gaze lifted once to the spiral of worn steps leading upward. "They did not stay," she said. "That's fine," Brinna replied. She stepped to the center of the tower and stood still for a moment. The air felt steady. The stone walls held the quiet close. No echo followed their footsteps. Edrin rose and brushed dust from his knees. "If they used it for shelter," he said, they moved on quickly. "Yes," Thomas agreed. Kayla returned to the doorway and looked back into the clearing. "No waiting," she said. Brinna gave a small nod. "Then we'll follow." She turned once more, letting her gaze pass across the interior stone. There was nothing hidden here, nothing urgent, only the stillness of a place long unused. They stepped back into the light. The grass bent again beneath their boots. The midday sun rested high above the clearing. The road beyond curved gently east, waiting. Brinna adjusted her blade once more. "Not far," she said. They resumed walking, leaving the tower behind them. The clearing settled again into quiet. The breeze moved through the grass, and the watchtower stood as it always had, holding its silence. The road narrowed again beyond the tower. The trees thinned, giving way to uneven ground and scattered brush. The air felt warmer here, the sun resting longer on open patches of earth. Kayla slowed first. She did not raise her hand. She simply stopped walking. Brinna halted beside her. "Movement," Kayla said. "Where?" Edrin asked. "Low, ahead, right side." They stood without shifting. The brush moved once more. A small shape stepped onto the road, then another. Wild dogs, lean, dust-colored, ribs faintly visible beneath coarse fur. They did not snarl. They did not rush. They watched. Thomas exhaled softly. "Hungry," he said. Brenna stepped forward 1 pace. Her hand rested lightly on the hilt of her blade. The dog spread slightly across the road, uncertain but unwilling to retreat. Kayla lifted her bow in a single smooth motion. She did not draw. "3," she said. Edrin adjusted his satchel strap. "No sign of sickness," he said. The largest dog stepped closer. Its ears were low, its movement cautious. Brenna drew her blade in one steady motion. The sound of steel leaving leather was quiet. She held it angled downward. The dog lunged. Brenna moved once. A single step to the side. One clean arc of steel. The motion was controlled and brief. The dog fell still in the dust. The others scattered immediately. Kayla loosed one arrow. The second dog dropped near the brush line. The third disappeared into the grass without sound. Silence returned quickly. Brenna lowered her blade. A small line of blood marked the dust near her boot. She did not look at it for long. "That's enough of them," she said. Kayla eased the tension from her bow and stepped forward. "2," she confirmed. Edrin approached Brenna first. "Hold still," he said. She extended her forearm without comment. A shallow scrape marked the leather near her wrist, where a tooth had grazed, but not broken skin. Edrin placed his fingers lightly against the spot. A soft warmth moved outward from his touch. The leather darkened slightly where the warmth passed. "That will hold," he said. Brenna nodded. Thomas walked toward the fallen dogs. He rested his palm briefly above one of them. The faint warmth moved again, gentler this time. "Nothing unnatural," he said. Kayla retrieved her arrow and wiped it clean against dry grass before returning it to her quiver. The wind shifted once more. The grass bent, then settled. Edrin stepped back and adjusted his satchel. "They were pushed from somewhere," he said. "Likely," Thomas agreed. Brenna slid her blade back into its sheath. The leather accepted it with a soft sound. Kayla scanned the tree line once more. "No more," she said. They waited another moment. Not from concern, from habit. The road remained still. The insects resumed their quiet hum. Brenna rolled her shoulder once. "We continue," she said. They stepped around the fallen shapes without pause. The dust settled slowly behind them. Ahead, the road curved east again, and the day remained steady. The light began to soften as the afternoon passed. The road dipped gradually and rose again toward a second ridge. The air cooled slightly beneath the lengthening shadows. The trees ahead stood closer together, their branches leaning inward as if drawn by habit. Kayla slowed once more. "Smoke," she said. "Old?" Edrin asked. "Yes." The scent was faint. Not fresh ash, not burning wood. Only the lingering trace of something that had burned and gone quiet. They walked toward it without change in pace. Beyond the ridge, the land opened into a shallow hollow. At its center stood another watchtower, older and broader than the first. Its stonework was darker, worn by more years of wind and rain. This tower had no door, only an open arch at its base. The ground before it showed signs of passage: flattened grass, broken stems, scattered straw. Brenna stopped at the edge of the hollow. "This is where they paused," she said. Kayla crouched and studied the earth. "Several," she said. "Not animals." Edrin adjusted the strap across his shoulder. "How many?" "4. Maybe 5. Thomas stepped closer to the tower's shadow. The light did not reach far inside. The archway held a deeper gray than the clearing around it. He extended his hand once more. A faint warmth moved outward, slow and deliberate. "It lingers," he said quietly. "Unsettled?" Edrin asked. Thomas considered. "No," he said. "Occupied." Brenna nodded. "We'll look." They descended the shallow slope together. The grass brushed against their boots, whispering softly as they passed. Near the base of the tower lay the remains of a small fire pit. The stones were arranged carefully. The ash within had cooled completely. Kayla touched the edge of the pit. 2 nights, she said. Edrin knelt beside it and sifted lightly through the ash. "Cooked grain," he said. "No meat." "Travelers," Thomas murmured. Brenna stepped through the archway first. The interior air felt cooler than outside. The stone held the day's fading warmth, but not its light. Narrow slits in the wall allowed thin beams to fall across the floor. Dust drifted in the shafts of gold. The tower was not empty. At the far side of the room, 3 figures sat against the wall. They did not rise quickly. They did not reach for weapons. One of them lifted his head slowly. "Guild?" he asked. "Yes," Edrin said. The man nodded once. Relief settled over his features without drama. The others remained seated. One held a wrapped bundle at her side. Another leaned forward, elbows resting on knees. Kayla stepped slightly to the right, giving space, but keeping view of the room. "No weapons drawn," she said quietly. Brenna lowered her hand from her blade. "What happened?" she asked. The seated man spoke evenly. "Caravan broke apart," he said. "Road ahead narrowed. Something moved in the trees. Not large, just enough." "Animals?" Edrin asked. "Maybe," the man said. "We turned back. Others scattered." Thomas moved a step forward. "You stayed here," he said. "For a night," the man replied. "We meant to leave at dawn." Brenna glanced at the others. "Any injuries?" she asked. The woman with the bundle shook her head. "Only tired," she said. Edrin approached without hurry. "May I?" he asked. She nodded. He knelt beside her and placed his hand lightly against her wrist. A soft warmth moved outward. Her shoulders eased slightly. "Exhaustion," he said. "Nothing more." The third traveler looked toward the archway. "There were dogs," he said quietly. "We saw them," Brinna replied. The man nodded. "That's why we stayed inside." Kayla stepped closer to the doorway and looked out into the hollow. The light had shifted lower now. The shadows stretched longer across the grass. "No movement," she said. Thomas lowered his hand. "There is no lingering threat here," he said. "Only travelers who lost direction." Brinna rested her weight evenly on both feet. "You'll return with us," she said to the seated man. He nodded. "We will." The woman gathered her bundle. The third traveler stood slowly, brushing dust from his trousers. Edrin rose and adjusted his satchel. "We'll walk before dark," he said. Kayla stepped out into the hollow first. The breeze moved through the grass again. The second watchtower remained silent behind them, holding only cooled ash and fading warmth. As they began the slow ascent back toward the ridge, the sky shifted toward evening gold. The road beyond waited, steady and familiar. And this time, they did not walk alone. They did not rush the return. The three travelers walked between Brinna and Edrin. Their steps were slower but steady. The road beneath them felt wider now that the light had softened. The sky shifted gradually toward evening. Gold thinned into pale amber. The first cool edge of night touched the air. Insects resumed their quiet rhythm along the grass. They stopped before the ridge, not because it was dark, because it was where the road widened and flattened. "This will do," Brinna said. The travelers did not question it. Kayla moved first, stepping off the road and circling the edge of the clearing. She marked the space in the same quiet way she always did. "Open ground," she said. "No recent tracks." Edrin set his satchel down and began arranging small stones in a shallow ring. The fire he built was modest. Dry twigs, 2 thicker branches, nothing that would carry sparks too far. Camus rested one palm briefly above the ring. A faint warmth gathered there before the first flame caught. The fire rose slowly and remained low. The light it gave was gentle and even. The 3 travelers sat close together on the far side of the ring. The woman unwrapped her bundle and shared a small portion of grain cakes with the others. Brinna removed her gloves and held her hands near the warmth. No one spoke for several moments. The fire settled into a steady burn. Edrin poured water into the wooden cup again and passed it around. Each drank in turn, without hurry. Kayla remained seated slightly apart, bow resting across her knees. She watched the road. After a time, one of the travelers spoke. "We thought it was bandits," he said quietly. Brinna shook her head once. "Not this stretch," she said. "Dogs, then?" the woman asked. "Yes," Kayla replied. The third traveler leaned forward. "They moved strange," he said, like they were watching. "They were," Thomas said. The traveler nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he had already known. The fire shifted and released a brief shower of sparks. They rose only a short distance before fading. Edrin reached into his satchel and withdrew a small cloth bundle. He handed it to the woman. "For strength," he said. She accepted it and bowed her head slightly. "Thank you." The air cooled further as the sky deepened into blue. The first star appeared overhead. Kayla lifted her gaze briefly. "Clear night," she said. "That's good," Edrin replied. Brinna leaned back slightly on her hands. "We'll take watches," she said. "Short turns." The travelers nodded. Thomas shifted closer to the fire and rested his palms on his knees. The warmth from the flames met the warmth that lingered faintly around him. The two blended without brightness. For a time, the only sounds were the soft crackle of wood and the distant rustle of grass. One of the travelers began to speak again, then stopped. "It's fine," Brinna said quietly. He nodded. Edrin lay back on his cloak first. "I'll wake at the second star," he said. Kayla remained seated, posture unchanged. "I'll watch until then," she replied. The woman traveler lay beside the fire, bundle beneath her head. Within minutes, her breathing deepened. Thomas closed his eyes but did not sleep. The firelight reflected faintly against the lower stones of the ridge. The road beyond remained empty. After a time, Brinna rose without sound and stepped a short distance from the fire. She stood with her back to the clearing and faced the open land. The wind moved gently across the grass. No footsteps approached. No branches snapped. The night settled in layers. Kayla shifted once. "Nothing," she said. Brinna nodded. "That's fine." The stars grew brighter overhead. The fire burned lower, and the road, beneath the quiet sky, remained undisturbed. Dawn returned without disturbance. The fire had burned low in the night. Only faint embers remained beneath pale ash. The sky above the ridge shifted slowly from deep blue to gray. Kayla was already standing. "Movement," she said quietly. "Not near." Farther down the road, Brinna rose and rolled her shoulders once. The three travelers stirred but did not panic. They sat up slowly, watching. Edrin stepped beside Kayla and looked toward the curve of the road. A wagon stood there, its wheel tilted at an angle. One mule remained harnessed. The other lay still in the grass. Thomas exhaled softly. "That's the break," he said. Brinna nodded. "We'll look." They approached without haste. The grass was flattened around the wagon. A torn sack lay open near the wheel. Grain had spilled across the earth and drawn small birds that now lifted away as the party neared. The mule that remained alive shifted weakly. Edrin stepped forward at once. "Easy," he murmured. He placed one hand against the animal's neck. A faint warmth moved outward. The mule's breathing steadied. Kayla circled the wagon. "No people," she said. They moved on. Brinna crouched near the broken wheel. The wood had split cleanly. "Weight shifted," she said. "Wheel failed." Thomas walked to the edge of the road and examined the tree line. He extended his hand once more. The faint pressure moved outward in a slow wave. "It followed," he said. "What did?" one of the travelers asked quietly. "Something larger than the dogs," Thomas replied, "but not much." Kayla stood. "Tracks here," she said. They were heavier than before. Deep prints in the damp earth beyond the road. "Boar," Brinna said. "Likely," Kayla agreed. The travelers exchanged uneasy glances. Adrian remained beside the mule. "It's wounded," he said. "Not from teeth." Brinna walked to the fallen animal. The second mule lay on its side, breathing shallowly. A gash marked its flank where a tusk had torn through harness and hide. Edrin knelt and placed both hands gently against the wound. The warmth he summoned was steady and contained. The blood darkened briefly beneath his touch, then slowed. "That's enough," he said after a moment. The mule's breathing eased. Thomas turned his gaze toward the deeper brush. The grass there moved once, then stilled. Kayla lifted her bow. She drew it this time. "Left," she said. Brinna stepped forward, blade already in hand. The brush parted. The boar emerged slowly. It was broad and low to the ground. Mud clung to its coarse hide. One tusk was chipped near the tip. It did not charge immediately. It watched. Brinna held her stance. The boar stamped once. Then it lunged. The movement was heavy but direct. Brinna met it halfway. She stepped to the side and brought her blade down in one firm arc. The steel struck cleanly at the neck. The boar stumbled and fell, breath leaving it in a single low rush. Kayla loosed her arrow a heartbeat later. It struck just behind the shoulder. The animal did not rise again. Silence followed. Only the distant rustle of leaves remained. Brinna withdrew her blade and wiped it once against dry grass. "That's enough," she said. Kayla lowered her bow. "One," she confirmed. Edrin remained with the mule. "It will walk," he said. Karmas approached the fallen animal and rested his palm briefly above it. "No corruption," he said. "Only hunger." The travelers stood very still. One of them spoke quietly. "So that was it?" "Yes," Brinna replied. Kayla scanned the brush again. "No more," she said. The birds began to return to the spilled grain. Edrin stood and brushed his hands together lightly. "We'll right the wagon," he said. They worked without hurry. Brinna lifted the broken wheel free, while Thomas steadied the frame. Kayla retrieved scattered sacks and set them upright. Edrin adjusted the harness carefully around the healed mule. The travelers watched, then joined in. The road slowly returned to order. When the wagon stood straight again, Brinna stepped back. "You'll manage from here," she said. The man nodded. "Yes." Edrin handed him a small cloth bundle. "For the animal," he said. "Thank you." The boar lay still at the edge of the grass. Kayla retrieved her arrow once more and returned it to her quiver. The sun had climbed above the ridge now. Light settled evenly across the road. Brinna slid her blade back into its sheath. The leather closed around it with a soft sound. "We'll walk you to the next bend," she said. The travelers nodded. They moved together once more along the familiar road. Behind them, the clearing quieted. The deeper threat had passed, and the morning remained steady. They walked the travelers to the bend in the road. The wagon moved more steadily now. The repaired wheel turned without complaint. The mule's stride was slower but even. At the curve, Brinna stopped. "This is where we part," she said. The man at the front of the wagon nodded. "We can manage from here." Edrin stepped closer to the mule once more and rested his hand briefly against its neck. The warmth he offered was lighter this time. "Keep it slow," he said. The woman with the bundle bowed her head. "You have our thanks." Brinna inclined her head in return. "That's what we're here for." The wagon rolled onward. Its wheels made a low, rhythmic sound as it disappeared beyond the bend. The road grew quiet again. Kayla watched until the wagon was fully out of sight. "No following," she said. Thomas folded his hands behind his back. "It's settled," he said. Brinna adjusted the strap across her shoulder. "Then we return." They turned west. The morning had matured into late day. The light was brighter now, though softer at the edges. The breeze carried the faint scent of warmed earth and crushed grass. They walked without hurry. The place where the boar had fallen was already quiet. Birds had scattered the remaining grain. The grass bent where it had been disturbed, but it would stand again. Kayla paused briefly. "Nothing remains," she said. "That's fine," Brinna replied. They continued past the hollow and the older tower. The fire pit there held only grey ash. The hollow felt smaller now that it was empty. Edrin glanced toward the archway. "No one stayed," he said. "They won't," Thomas replied. The climb over the ridge felt easier in daylight. The road widened gradually. Fields returned in pale greens and soft golds. A farmer worked in the distance, bending and rising in a steady rhythm. Kayla walked a few steps off the road again. "Hoofprints heading west," she said. "The wagon," Edrin replied. "Yes." Brinna's stride remained even. The land opened further as they descended the slope. The first watchtower appeared in the distance, its broken edge softened by afternoon light. They did not stop there this time. The clearing lay still. Grass moved gently where they had once eaten bread. Thomas paused only long enough to rest his hand lightly against the outer stone. "It will hold," he said. They continued on. The road curved toward town. Stone replaced packed earth beneath their boots. The sound shifted slightly, firmer now. Smoke rose faintly in the distance. Kayla lifted her gaze. "Evening fires," she said. "Yes," Edrin answered. The town walls came into view slowly. Shutters stood open now. Voices drifted lightly across the square. The smell of baked bread lingered again in the air. Brinna slowed as they approached the gate. "No urgency," she said. "There never was," Thomas replied. They passed beneath the arch and into the familiar streets. The square held its usual quiet movement. A merchant closed a stall. A child ran across the far side of the fountain and was called back gently. The guild hall doors stood open. Warmth from the hearth drifted outward. Kayla stepped inside first. "Clear," she said, though it was not needed. The clerk looked up from his ledger as they approached. "You've returned," he said. "We have," Edrin replied. "Trouble?" the clerk asked. "Resolved," Brinna said. The clerk nodded once and made a mark in his book. "That's good," he said. Thomas removed the folded notice from his coat and placed it on the table. "No further concern," he added. The clerk slid a small pouch of coin across the wood. "Standard rate," he said. Brinna lifted it and weighed it once in her palm. "That's enough," she said. They moved toward the hearth without discussion. Boots rested near the fire, drying beside the embers. The scent of smoke and iron lingered in the air. Kayla unstrung her bow. Edrin set his satchel down and flexed his fingers once. Thomas leaned slightly closer to the warmth. Brinna removed her gloves and held her hands toward the low flame. The guild hall resumed its quiet rhythm around them. Outside, the sky deepened toward evening. Another notice would likely hang by morning. But for now, the road was still, and they were home. Evening settled quietly over the guild hall. The stone walls held the warmth of the day longer than the streets outside. The hearth burned low once more, embers glowing beneath a thin layer of ash. Smoke rose in a steady line toward the darkened beams above. The hall was awake, though no one hurried. A clerk moved between the tables with a ledger tucked beneath one arm. The scratch of quill against parchment was soft and unbroken. A door opened and closed somewhere in the back, wood touching stone without force. Boots rested near the fire, set carefully to dry. Brinna Stonehand sat on the same long bench as before. Her armor lay beside her in its familiar arrangement. Worn leather, dull steel, each piece placed with the same quiet care. She held a cup in her hand. She took a slow drink and considered it. "This is stronger than this morning," she said. Her voice remained low and steady. Across the table, Edrin Vale adjusted the strap of his satchel once more before setting it fully aside. He flexed his fingers and rested his hands loosely on the wood. "They open the better casks at dusk," he said. Kayla Thorne stood near the eastern window again. The sky beyond had deepened into indigo. One or two stars showed faintly above the rooftops. The street below moved in slow patterns as merchants closed their doors. "Two wagons passed west," she said, both steady. No one asked how she knew. At the far end of the table, Thomas Graywick unfolded the ledger copy of the notice and read it without urgency. The parchment felt softer now, as though it had already aged a little. "Routine work," he said. Edrin glanced toward him. "It was," he replied. Thomas gave a small nod and folded the page. The guild hall settled into its evening rhythm. A pair of mercenaries crossed the room quietly. Someone near the hearth laughed once, the sound low and brief. A chair scraped and then steadied. Brinna removed her gloves and held her hands near the fire. The warmth met her skin without rush. Kayla unstrung her bow and placed it carefully along the wall. She ran her fingers along the curve of the wood once before stepping back. Edrin opened his satchel one final time and checked the cloth bundles within. Herbs rested where they should. Linen remained neatly folded. Satisfied, he closed it. Thomas withdrew a small piece of chalk and turned it between his fingers before returning it to his coat. The clerk approached their table with measured steps. "No complaints," he said. "Good," Brinna replied. "Roads clear?" he asked. "For now," Edrin said. The clerk made a mark in his ledger. "That's enough," he said. He moved on without further question. The fire shifted softly. Outside, the wind passed along the street and faded. Brinna leaned back slightly on the bench. "We'll rest tonight," she said. "Yes," Thomas agreed. Kayla turned from the window and took her seat. "No movement," she said. "That's fine," Brinna replied. For a time, none of them spoke. The hearth continued its steady burn. The scent of smoke and iron lingered in the air. Somewhere near the back of the hall, a door opened and closed again. Boots rested near the fire, drying beside the embers. Another notice would hang by morning. The road would stretch east once more. But for now, the hall was warm. The fire was low, and the night remained quiet.